Alright, so here's the beginning of the pinch pot demonstration. Basically, he's going to grab a hunk of clay and start forming it into a ball of metal. Use my thumb to push down to the inside, make a kind of cavity or well, if you will, and then start pinching around the outsides, keeping my thumb on the inside, my fingers on the outside, trying to pinch together, um, basically to start creating the form of this vessel. I might actually accidentally put a hole in it, but we're going to find at this point with the clay really wet like this, it's really easy to push and mush back together. Right now I'm basically just trying to smooth out the inside, stretch out to make it wider, and trying to thin out. Our goal whenever we're working in clay is try to get the wall thickness or the thickness of the clay to be as even as possible. If we have a lot of extremes in thick to thin, things have a tendency to want to crack, and that can be problematic. So we want to kind of start here early on, trying to recognize that level of thickness. So I just keep working around. You can see I never really pinch in one spot over and over again. I want to try and create this repetitive motion all over the entire surface. I might get a little tear like that. That's not a big deal at this point. I can just mush a little bit of clay in there. A lot of times people are told at these points, like, to try and add water or slip or something like that to help make connections. We want to be really careful not to add any water to this. I'm going to start using a rib to smooth out the inside of this. This is kind of a hard plastic one. Your kit's got a metal one, but it's essentially the same thing, just some slight differences. Back in the corner of the main ceramics room, we have a bunch of, Lazy Susan bases like this. I find it really easy to work on something that spins, and then I can put it on a little board. The less I have to pick this up and move it, the stronger it's going to be. If I keep picking it up and putting it down, kind of plopping it on the table, it's going to really weaken the clay. So I can spin the Lazy Susan. I can pick the board up rather than moving the piece itself. So right now I'm just really focusing on smoothing in that outside as much as I can. A lot of the details of the outside of this I can deal with after it gets a little bit firmer. But the inside I really want to smooth out now. And so, our first project here, our goal is to get to about 6 inches in height at least. And so what I had there was about, I'm going to say 3 or 4 inches. So now I'm going to start rolling out some coils to add more height to it. You can see as I do this, try and just keep really smooth motions. I even try to squeeze out as much of a coil shape in my hands first as I can. I'm not too overly concerned about the overall consistency of it. The coil, I want to be fairly thick though, maybe like the thickness of my thumb. And then as I'm pinching this on, it's kind of difficult with this to see exactly what I'm doing. But essentially what I'm doing is all of the pressure that's happening to connect this is I'm pushing down with my thumb on the inside, and then using my fingers on the outside as support. So again, I'm just kind of pinching these together and overlapping on the inside and then squeezing to the outside. And you can see where my thumb is on the inside. I'm just kind of squeezing and pinching in and down. And then my outside fingers there, just, again, kind of adding support, adding a little bit more squeezing. Here we go. So we've got about 3 rows of coils. It's usually a good time, I think, to try and start smoothing those out. Usually if you go over the smoothing process here, we're doing a couple things. One, I just don't want to see the coils. And then 2, it's actually going to make this stronger, hold the form better. I'm going to be able to do more with the form. If I try and go too much past like 3 rows of coils, it's going to get really hard to compress those together. I'm going to keep saying compress over and over again because compressing is really important. You see the inside where those coils are overlapping. I want to get rid of those on the inside as well. So I'm compressing this, trying to make this much stronger. I'm not trying to really refine the overall surface texture. I'm not too worried about that. There's a lot of texture on the outside. At this point, this is, we're in what's called the green wear phase. So my finger was at 6 inches there. So we're in the green wear phase, meaning that the clay is pre-fired. And then inside of the green wear phase, we're in the wet clay stage, which is really one of the best stages, I think. The clay is really soft, really malleable, but it can be challenging to really refine things. And so right here, I'm using that rib on the inside to kind of push out, kind of give this like a bellying, volumetric kind of form to it. So it's in the wet clay stage, using a paddle to try and change that. At this point I can really do a lot to the clay, but one thing I can't do is really smooth down the surface. I would consider this a fairly smooth surface, but you can see there's a good bit of impressions throughout the surface from the ribs, my fingers, how I'm touching it. And I'd really want this to be more in what we'd call the leather hard stage, to be fixing that. So a lot of ceramics can be kind of like hurry up and wait, because I can really change the shape right now like you see me doing with that rib, but I can't refine a lot of things. So refinement kind of happens later. Right now, like I said, this is the wet clay stage. Eventually this is going to lose moisture. This is a water-based clay that we use, a stoneware clay. And as that water starts to evaporate, the clay gets firmer and will have less of an ability to want to bend, be poked, and be misshapen. So what I'm doing here is I'm about to stop working on this one. I'm going to make that taller later, but I want to set up a little bit. And you saw there where I was moving it on the board, because again, that's going to be a much safer way to transport something rather than picking the piece up. So I'm just going to start another little pinch pot for making another vessel that I'm going to start here. And I'm basically just making like a shallow bowl, a shallow dish, and now I'm just going to use that rib to just really kind of, again, try and refine that form, compress it, strengthen it. Basically clay is a whole bunch of particles going in a bunch of different ways. And that can be pretty weak sometimes, but if we use ribs or our fingers to compress things, they become a lot stronger. And as I do more to this, that strength is really going to be important as this video continues. So it looks pretty good, pretty smooth on the inside. And I'm about to set this down to the side. And I'm going to start a second one with another hunk of clay and try and get this to be as similar to that as I can. And it's sped up because it's kind of the same as we just saw. So it looks like, so I'm trying to create two semi-identical forms with the openings that are going to be able to meet each other. Essentially this is going to be turned into one piece, two pieces into one. That's going to be kind of like a sphere or a ball shape, if you will. So I'm just trying to get this one smooth, again, trying to compress that inside really well, make it really strong. Start fitting those together. Again, that wet clay stage right now, it's so malleable. The fit might not be perfect, but I can really kind of mush and bend it into place to get it where I want, so that if it doesn't fit perfect, it'll be okay in the end. So to make sure that these are attached really well, I'm about to grab a needle tool to score these together, kind of like almost like creating like a stitching pattern across these two surfaces. This is where a fork would be much more efficient, or something like that. But again, as I do this, like I mentioned before, I'm not adding any water. This clay's got more than enough moisture to stick to itself. So I'm just going to score this really heavily, come back with my rib, and just compress the heck out of this. Because this seam, I really want to get rid of as much as I can with this rib. And again, water is going to make this really weak at this point. It tends to be people tend to think that when they're beginning, water is going to help things, but you're just going to have to believe me that it's going to make it worse. So I'm just really trying to compress that. You can see I'm supporting it in my hand so it doesn't want to misshapen too much. Right now this kind of acts like a balloon. So there's air on the inside, and that's going to help me be able to push on this and not have it disform too much. So again, I can just kind of shape that in my hands to get that about as round as I can. I don't need it to be perfectly spherical. But fairly close. Looks fairly close, not too bad. And again, surface texture refinement can all happen later when the clay is firmed up. Trying to do too much of that right now, you'll find can be quite frustrating. So we're about to jump into our first piece that we started. Now I'm going to start adding some more clay to it to again make it taller. It's been sitting for a few minutes, so I'm just going to go ahead and use my needle tool again, just to lightly score that surface before adding a coil to it. And again, I'm trying not to add any moisture. Again, just pinching that coil on the same as before, trying to use all of my pressure coming from the inside, kind of smearing the inside together, and then using my fingers on the outside as a support mechanism. Get a little bit more clay to even that out. Now I'm just going to smooth this out with a rib. Again, sometimes you can use the coil marks on the outside, maybe as like a sort of decoration. But for this, I'm trying to smooth it out as much as I can. And then I can, most of the compressing I've been doing is kind of vertically. If I go horizontally with it, I can kind of really make a separation between, the body of this, where that shoulder's coming in, and the neck of the vessel. A lot of times we can use, somewhat like anatomy type language. Vessels, pots have feet. They have mouths at the opening. When it comes in at the top, that's like a nice shoulder, and then kind of a neck situation where it goes up from the shoulder. As it gets wider, oftentimes it'll get referred to as the belly of the pot. Here I am just trying to really clean up the inside, trying to again compress it. Right now the rim of this is a little jaggedy, so I'm going to get a sponge and just get it a little bit wet and just try and wring out all the water as I can. Just very gently rub over the edge of this rim with that sponge to kind of compress that down. Again, I didn't really dump water on it. It's just a very light application with that sponge. Now I'm gonna what we have now here is what we call a red rib, or a really soft rib. Before, I was using what's in my left hand on the screen, was a much firmer rib. And now this red soft one is really good for just smoothing things out. It's not necessarily as forceful as a firmer rib, so it can give you kind of a little bit of a delicate interior, delicate softness to that rim. We really want to pay attention to that rim quality. If it's not compressed well, it's going to crack. And again, I'm just going to take the corner of this other rib and just accentuate that division of the shoulder to the neck of the pot to just really kind of just create a nice line right there. Kind of help break up the surface a little bit. Now I'm just going to score a little patch right there with my needle tool. Grab a little ball of clay that I'm going to end up turning into almost like a little small handle, or like a nubbin style handle. Might be, it's not going to be practical to really pick up, but it can be a little bit more decorative. And then I'm just going to use a needle tool to kind of pierce through to give it a hole, to give it that look of being a handle. Again, being much more decorative than actually functional. Then I'm going to put one on the other side as well. Give it a little bit of balance, give it a side and a side, and then as I decorate this later, I can think about fronts and backs and what have you. just cleaning that rim up a little bit more, just to get it nice and smooth, nice and soft. You know, we can't see a whole lot of that interior, but I really want to make sure it's nice and smooth. And then lastly, I just want to leave this ball sphere shape that I've made to dry a little bit before I can do more to it. And I don't want to just leave it sitting on the table flat. It's going to sit on this coil. It's going to be almost like a little basket for it to sit in, just so we don't get a flat spot sitting on a table. And I'll be back in Pinch Pots number 2 to talk more about how these are going from here.